If I knew then what I know now, I would have loved deeper, forgiven faster, and worried far less about what didn't matter. But child, let me tell you, the truth waits for no one. You either learn it the hard way or you listen when wisdom speaks. Time isn't just passing, it's teaching. But you don't realize that when you're young. When you're young, time feels endless. You believe you've got years to figure it all out, decades to become who you want to be, and some distant horizon where wisdom will just show up like mail that finally gets delivered. But those who've lived to see 80 will tell you, time was never just moving, it was trying to show you something all along. An old man once said, "I didn't notice the lessons in time until my hands were too shaky to write them down." And that right there, that's the tragedy of youth. You spend the early chapters rushing through pages, trying to get to the good part, not realizing the good part was in the margins. It was the quiet Tuesdays, the ordinary mornings, the times you said nothing and still learned everything. Time doesn't raise its voice. It won't compete with the noise of your distractions. It speaks in whispers. A mistake you made 3 times before you finally paid attention. A person you didn't value until they were gone. A moment you rushed through that you now wish you could replay in slow motion. Time offers you the same test over and over again until you recognize the pattern, until you stop reacting and start reflecting. One woman, 86 years old and full of light in her eyes, said something I'll never forget. "I didn't just live through time, I learned how to listen to it. When she was younger," she told me, she thought lessons only came from books or teachers, but then time taught her how to hear the unsaid, how to feel the weight of a silence, how to read between the lines of someone's goodbye. Time taught her that pain is a professor, grief a mirror, and patience a survival skill. And maybe that's the real issue. We don't realize we're in school until the test is over. Life doesn't hand you a syllabus. There's no midterm warning, no final exam alert. It just keeps teaching. The question is, are you learning? There's a kind of lesson that only the years can give. No podcast, no book, no mentor can replace what time gives you through lived experience. Time teaches you how to be alone without being lonely, how to stop begging people to see your worth, how to say no without guilt and yes without fear. Time teaches you that the loudest people usually know the least, and the quiet ones often carry galaxies in their silence. When you're young, you think the lesson is to win, to hustle, to collect. But the elders will tell you the real lesson is to release, to surrender the need to be right, to let go of what was never meant for you, to stop running toward approval like it's oxygen. They say time stripped them of their egos, peeled back the need to impress, and left them with the truth. That presence is the real prize. One 81-year-old said, "Time didn't just give me wrinkles, it gave me reverence. Reverence for the ordinary, for the sound of birds in the morning, for her own breath, for people who stay." She didn't care anymore about who watched her succeed. She cared about who held her hand when she failed. That shift didn't happen overnight. It happened through decades of rushing, falling, breaking, and rising again. And here's what's powerful. Time doesn't discriminate. It comes for everyone. It humbles everyone. Whether you're rich or poor, famous or forgotten, time will eventually teach you the same thing, that you don't own it, you only walk beside it. And if you don't walk with intention, you'll trip over your own blind spots. Time is a patient teacher. It won't argue with you. It'll wait. It'll let you repeat the same mistake 5, 10, 20 times. Until one day you finally see the pattern and say, wait, I've been here before. That moment, that's not failure, that's learning. That's time giving you another chance to grow up emotionally, to take responsibility, to stop blaming and start choosing differently. And time also teaches through loss. It shows you what really matters, not through addition, but through subtraction. The empty chair at the table, the phone call you can't make anymore, the smile you only see in old photographs. That's when time becomes sacred. That's when its lessons cut deep, because only then do you understand none of this is forever. And that's not meant to scare you, it's meant to wake you up. The elders didn't just get old, they got clear about what they would have done differently, yes, but also clear about what still matters now. Because here's the thing, they're still learning too. Time doesn't stop teaching just because you're older. It keeps showing you how to soften, how to surrender, how to simplify. So if you're rushing through your days, chasing what doesn't feed your soul, sacrificing your peace for the illusion of success, listen to the elders. They're not preaching. They're passing the baton. Not because they want applause, but because they don't want you to waste what they had to lose to finally understand. Time isn't just passing, it's teaching. Every second, every silence, every season. The question is, are you still pretending it's just a clock, or are you finally ready to treat it like the mentor it's always been? They say love is a spark, a flutter in the chest, a fire that burns hot and fast. But the elders will tell you something different, something deeper, something that doesn't make it onto movie screens, but makes it through 60 years of life together. Love, they say, is not a feeling, it's a decision. One woman, now 83, sat beside a framed picture of her wedding day, a black and white photo of two young dreamers with the world ahead of them. I loved him fiercely, she said, but there were days, years even, when I didn't feel in love. And that's when I learned what love really is. You choose it. You choose the person even when they're not easy to love. You choose the commitment even when life tries to shake it loose. When you're young, love is emotion. It's butterflies, stolen glances, passionate words at midnight. But ask anyone who's walked through decades of hardship, who's lost children, who's sat in hospital rooms, who's held hands through silence. They'll tell you love shows up when emotion runs out. Love steps in when your heart is tired and says, I'm not leaving. Love is the decision to stay when leaving would be easier. It's the choice to listen when you'd rather shut down. It's the courage to forgive when you've been wounded, not because the wound didn't matter, but because the person mattered more. That kind of love isn't built in a day, it's built in the daily. One 88-year-old man who buried his wife of 56 years said, every morning I woke up and made the same choice to be her person. Some mornings that meant kissing her forehead. Some mornings that meant keeping quiet. Some mornings that meant apologizing when I didn't want to. But love, real love, isn't about being right. It's about being there. And isn't that the truth we often miss? We confuse love with feeling good. We think love is meant to complete us, entertain us, excite us. But love isn't an escape from real life. It's the anchor that holds you steady in it. Love is when two people decide again and again not to give up on each other, even when life disappoints, even when hearts harden, even when it would be easier to walk away. The elders tell stories of sacrifices made quietly, of meals cooked without thanks, of illnesses nursed in silence. They speak of growing apart and then growing back together. They laugh about how attraction fades and reappears in new forms, like admiration, like partnership, like peace. They say love matures the same way people do. It softens, it humbles, it deepens. There's a tenderness in that wisdom. They remind us that falling in love is easy. It's staying in love that's the real work. And it is work. It's waking up every day and asking yourself, how can I love them better? It's asking not just what you're getting, but what you're giving. Because love isn't just meant to make you feel good. It's meant to grow you, to shape you, to strip you of selfishness and show you what it means to truly show up for someone else. And not just in romance, love as a decision applies to every relationship. The decision to love your children when they disappoint you. The decision to love a friend through their darkest seasons. The decision to love yourself when you feel unworthy. Feelings are fragile. Decisions endure. An elderly woman once said, I used to think love was when he brought me flowers. Now I know. It was when he sat beside me after my surgery and helped me learn how to walk again. That's the kind of love that doesn't glitter, but glows. That kind of love doesn't shout. It whispers, "I'm not going anywhere." So many young hearts break because they believe love is supposed to feel like fireworks every day. But love isn't found in the highs. It's proven in the lows. It's proven when the money runs out, when the bodies age, when the arguments are loud and the silence is louder. It's in those moments that love becomes what it was always meant to be, a choice. And that choice, it's made again and again, not because you have to, but because you want to, because something deeper than emotion holds you there, something like loyalty, something like grace, something like home. The elders don't talk about perfect love. They talk about real love, messy, patient, forgiving, resilient love, the kind that sees all of you, your flaws, your fears, your past, and still says, "I choose you." So if you're waiting for a feeling to tell you when to love, you might be waiting forever. But if you're willing to choose love, to keep choosing it through storms and stillness, you just might find what they found, something rare, something strong, something time can't touch. A man in his late 80s once said, with eyes heavier than his age, "I carried anger longer than I carried my own children, and it didn't protect me, it poisoned me." His voice trembled not from weakness, but from the weight of what he had held on to for too long. And in his honesty was a truth many don't learn until it's almost too late. Forgiveness doesn't free the other person, it frees you. He said the bitterness started small, a word spoken in haste, a betrayal he didn't expect, a wound that didn't bleed but festered. At first, he convinced himself he was justified, that holding on to his anger was his right, that it kept him strong. But over the years, that anger hardened. It built walls. It turned into cold silences, into distance between people he once loved. And in the quiet, it began to eat away at his peace. He looked me in the eye and said, "I thought I was punishing them, but I was the one stuck in the prison. And every year, the walls got taller." Forgiveness, he learned, is not about pretending something didn't hurt. It's not about letting someone off the hook. It's not about erasing what happened. Forgiveness is about releasing yourself from the burden of carrying what was never meant to be yours forever. It's about choosing freedom over fury, peace over pride. One elderly woman, 91 and sharp as ever, said, "I forgave my father 50 years after he left, not because he apologized. He never did. I forgave him so I could stop being angry every Father's Day." Her voice didn't crack when she said it. It was steady, peaceful, because she had finally learned the difference between remembering and reliving. She still remembered the pain, but she no longer lived inside it. Time taught her that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It doesn't mean saying what happened was okay. It means saying, "I won't let what happened keep me from being okay." That shift changes everything. The elders will tell you it's not the moment of betrayal that breaks you, it's the decades of resentment that follow. Resentment grows roots. It wraps around your joy, your trust, your ability to love again. It convinces you that being guarded is safer than being vulnerable, that being cold is stronger than being kind. But those same elders will also tell you you cannot live fully while holding on to the past tightly. One man who lost his brother in a fight they never resolved said, "The last words I ever said to him were in anger. I waited for him to say sorry first. He never did. Now I talk to a gravestone." He paused. "If I could go back, I wouldn't care who was right. I would have chosen peace over pride." That's the lesson. Forgiveness isn't about fairness, it's about freedom. Fairness keeps score. Freedom sets it down. Forgiveness says, "I may never get closure from you, so I'll give it to myself." It means accepting the apology you never got. It means refusing to let someone else's actions continue to control your emotions. The old souls will tell you it's not easy. It takes time, it takes tears, it takes digging deep into your own pain and deciding not to build your home there. But once you do, once you forgive not just others, but yourself too, you begin to feel light again. You begin to sleep better, breathe easier, smile without faking it, because you've let go of the weight. Some of the most peaceful people are not the ones who have had the easiest lives. They are the ones who have done the hard work of forgiveness. They carry loss, but not bitterness. They carry scars, but not shame. They walk lighter, not because nothing ever happened to them, but because they refuse to let it define them forever. Forgiveness is the deep breath after years of holding it in. It's the letter you never send, the tear you let fall without trying to catch it. It's the moment you say, I still remember, but I no longer ache. And here's what the elders say with the most conviction: it's never too late to forgive. Even if decades have passed, even if the person is gone, even if the pain still lingers. Forgiveness isn't a one-time event. It's a process. But every time you choose it, you take another step out of the cage and into your own freedom. So if you've been waiting for the perfect moment or for someone else to make it right, stop waiting. Make the decision for you, because forgiveness isn't something you give to the person who hurt you. It's something you give to the person you're still becoming. You whole, free, finally. An 82-year-old woman sat flipping through an old photo album, pages filled with frozen moments, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays long past. She paused at one photograph in particular, a black and white portrait of her in her 20s, standing on a beach in a sundress, the wind teasing her hair. I remember how beautiful I felt that day, she said softly. But you know what? No one ever talks about this picture. They talk about how I made them feel when they were going through something. That's what stayed. She had spent her youth, like many of us do, chasing an image, trying to look the part, dress the part, be admired, be seen. But time, ever the quiet teacher, had taught her that admiration fades and appearances blur. What remains is presence. What remains is kindness. When you're young, you spend so much energy trying to be beautiful. You try to measure up to standards someone else created. You look in the mirror and see flaws where others see nothing at all. You filter your pictures, straighten your posture, compare your reflection to strangers. But as you age, you begin to understand the truth that no one remembers the perfection of your face. They remember the comfort of your arms, the honesty in your eyes, the warmth of your words. One elderly man said, I spent my 20s in front of mirrors and my 80s in front of people. Guess which one taught me more? He chuckled as he said it, but there was something deeper behind the laugh. He had lived through decades of insecurity, only to realize that not one person he loved ever cared if his nose was crooked or his hair was thinning. They cared whether he showed up when it mattered, whether he apologized when he was wrong, whether he listened with his whole heart. The truth is, beauty as the world defines it has an expiration date, but impact, emotional, spiritual, relational, that's timeless. The ones who sit beside hospital beds, who speak life into broken hearts, who show up with a meal or a story or a moment of real listening, those are the people no one forgets. And yet, how many of us go through life believing that our value is in how we appear, that if we just looked a little different, we'd be more lovable, that the outside matters more than the inner world we carry? The elders will gently shake their heads and tell you, what's remembered about you won't be the way you looked walking into the room. It'll be the way someone felt after you left it. A grandmother recalled her granddaughter running into her arms saying, "You smell like cookies and safety." She laughed when she said it, but her eyes welled up with tears. "That," she whispered, "is the best compliment I've ever received. Not pretty, not perfect, just safe, just loved. Think about it. At funerals, people don't talk about waistlines and cheekbones. They talk about how someone made them laugh on a hard day, how they picked up the phone when no one else did, how they loved without conditions. That's the legacy. That's what gets passed down, the way you made people feel. And sometimes we don't realize the power of that until much later, after the mirrors have faded and the pictures are stored away, after youth has stepped aside for wisdom. That's when you realize you were never meant to be a masterpiece hanging in someone's gallery. You were meant to be a comfort, a force, a presence, someone who gave more than they took, someone who looked into eyes instead of at appearances. An old man who lived through wars and widowing said, "I remember the eyes of my wife more than her lipstick. I remember her laugh, the way she held my hand during bad news." That's what stuck. That's what I still feel. So much of our lives are spent on things people will never remember. But how you make them feel, that will live in them longer than your hairstyle ever could. When we strip everything else away, the titles, the achievements, the filters, the fashions, what's left is how we treat each other. Did we listen? Did we love well? Did we let people feel seen? The elders know now what many spend a lifetime chasing. That beauty fades, but character blooms. And if you're lucky, if you live long enough, you'll realize the goal was never to be the best looking in the room. The goal was to be the kindest, the most generous, the most honest, to be someone whose presence made others feel valued, heard, loved. Because at the end of the story, no one holds up your picture and says, "She was flawless." They say, "She made me feel like I mattered." And that's a beauty that time cannot touch. An 84-year-old woman once sat in her rocking chair, hands folded, eyes looking somewhere far beyond the window in front of her. "Oh yes, pain came," she said quietly. "It knocked on my door again and again, took things I never thought I could live without. But I made one decision that saved me. I refused to let it have the rest of me." She paused, then said, "Pain will happen, but suffering is a choice." At first, that statement feels harsh, especially to someone who's hurting. But if you listen closely to the ones who've lived through decades of loss, heartbreak, illness, betrayal, they're not saying pain isn't real. They're saying pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. There is a difference. Pain is the cut. Suffering is the finger that keeps pressing into it. You can't live long without encountering pain. The death of someone you love, the end of a relationship you thought would last, the disappointment that sinks in when a dream crumbles. These things are part of the human experience. No one escapes them. The elders know that well. They've buried children, lost homes, endured loneliness so sharp it stung their bones. And yet, they smile. They sit in peace. Not because life was easy for them, but because somewhere along the way, they stopped trying to control what hurt and started controlling how they responded to it. A man in his 90s who had survived war and widowhood said, "The pain nearly drowned me, but I decided not to carry it like a badge." He said it was tempting in his darkest moments to stay bitter, to become hard, to wall off his heart, but he realized that by doing that, he was choosing to relive the pain every day, to replay it, rehearse it, let it define him. That wasn't healing, that was suffering. He said, "I gave myself permission to feel the pain, but I also gave myself a deadline." Not a literal date, but a point where he stopped allowing the past to take his future hostage. Because the truth is, pain may knock, but you decide whether it unpacks and stays. You decide whether to feed it, whether to build it a bed in your mind. And sometimes, without knowing it, we nurse our wounds because they've become familiar. We wear our pain like a story we've told so many times we don't know who we are without it. But pain doesn't make you who you are. What you do with it does. One woman, after losing her son, said, "I let myself break completely. I cried until I couldn't breathe. But But eventually, I started planting flowers in his memory. I started volunteering. I started living again. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew he would have wanted that. That's what the elders teach us, not to be numb, but to be free, to feel the depth of sorrow, but not let it steal the sweetness of the years that remain. They remind us that healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without being wrecked. It's walking with a limp, but walking anyway. Suffering often comes from resistance, from trying to rewrite what has already happened, from trying to hold on to what life has already asked you to let go of. The elders speak softly, but they speak with truth. You can't stop the rain, but you can decide whether to dance in it or drown in it. They've seen what happens when people don't let go, how it twists their spirit, shortens their joy, makes their world smaller. And they've also seen what happens when someone chooses healing. Laughter returns, light comes back into their eyes. Purpose starts to bloom in places where only pain used to live. Choosing not to suffer doesn't mean pretending the pain wasn't there. It means choosing not to let it rob you twice, first in the moment and again in your memory. Some of the most radiant elders you'll meet have suffered deeply, but you wouldn't know it unless they told you, because they chose to transform their pain into perspective, into grace, into wisdom. A woman nearing her 90th birthday said it simply, "I didn't let the worst thing that happened to me become the only thing that defined me." She found beauty again, found music again, found a way to laugh even when her heart carried old wounds. That's the choice. Not between pain and no pain, but between pain and purpose. And every elder who has made that choice will tell you, the moment you stop clinging to the pain, you make space for joy to return. Maybe not all at once, maybe in small sips, but it comes. And that's how you keep living, not just existing. That's how you make peace with a life that holds both sorrow and sweetness. Pain will happen, but suffering, that's a door you don't have to walk through. An 87-year-old man once said, "I spent so many years chasing big moments, I nearly missed the ones that actually made life beautiful." He didn't say it with regret, but with a kind of quiet knowing, the kind of truth that only settles in after decades of living. He leaned forward in his chair, hands resting on knees shaped by time, and whispered, "Joy was never in the mountain peaks. It was in the morning coffee, in my wife's humming, in the sunlight falling on the kitchen floor. It was always there, I just didn't know how to see it." We're taught to think joy is something rare, something saved for birthdays, weddings, promotions, and vacations. We think we'll find it when we arrive somewhere, become someone, achieve something, but the elders know better. They know joy is not a destination. It's woven into the fabric of the ordinary, into the days we rush through, into the small things we think don't matter until they're gone. One elderly woman, 85 and soft-spoken, said, "I used to think my happiest days were behind me, but then I sat on my porch one morning and just listened to the birds, and I felt more alive than I had in years." She didn't win the lottery that morning. No surprise visitor came. No grand miracle occurred. She simply slowed down long enough to notice the miracle of being alive. That's the thing. Joy doesn't shout. It doesn't demand your attention. It whispers in quiet moments. The scent of fresh bread, the sound of your child laughing in the next room, the way someone says your name with love in their voice. But we're often too busy looking for fireworks to appreciate the candlelight. Elders speak often about the simple rituals that shape their lives: morning routines, shared meals, Sunday walks, letters written by hand. They don't tell stories of luxury, they tell stories of presence, of showing up fully, of tasting the soup before it gets cold, of noticing the way your partner's eyes still crinkle when they laugh. That's where joy lives, not in the extraordinary, but in the deeply seen ordinary. One man in his 90s spoke of his daily tea with his wife. "It was never fancy," he said. "She made it the same way every morning, but the ritual of sitting down together, of sharing silence, of holding her hand as we talked about nothing, that's what I miss the most." He didn't remember the fancy dinners or the anniversary trips nearly as clearly as he remembered those quiet, unremarkable mornings. And yet, those were the moments that made him feel richest. Joy doesn't require a spotlight. It just requires your attention. But most of us have been conditioned to rush. We scroll past life, waiting for something to blow us away, not realizing we're being breathed on by blessings every single day. A warm bed, a friend who listens, a home-cooked meal, the smell of rain. We think these things are background noise, but the elders remind us this is the good part. One woman said, "When I was young, I wanted everything to be big. Big house, big love, big adventure. Now I know better. I want quiet mornings, soft music, and someone who asks how I slept." Her voice cracked when she said it. Because now she knows what really mattered, and it wasn't the size of her house. It was whether anyone felt at home in her presence. Joy hides in the spaces we overlook, in the pause between conversations, in the hug that lasts a few seconds longer, in the kindness of strangers. It hides in watching someone you love eat a meal you made, in folding their laundry, in sharing a joke that only the two of you understand. These things won't make headlines, but they make a life. It's not that the big moments don't matter. They do, but they are rare. And the trouble is, we live most of our lives between them. If we wait for the grand, we miss the grace. Ask someone who's lived a full life what they remember most, and they won't speak of awards or headlines. They'll talk about the smell of their grandmother's kitchen, the feel of grass under bare feet, the sound of their children playing outside the window, the night their friends stayed on the phone until they fell asleep. The elders teach us that joy isn't something you chase, it's something you allow. It comes when you stop hurrying through your life, when you stop demanding constant excitement, when you realize that the simple, the repetitive, the quiet, that's where the magic has always been. They say the greatest luxury is the ability to enjoy your own life while it's happening. And if you ask them where to find joy, they'll smile gently and say, "You're probably already touching it. You just haven't named it yet." By the time you're 80, you realize life isn't about being right or rich or remembered. It's about being real, being present, being kind. These voices from the twilight of life aren't a warning, they're a gift. A whisper from your future self saying, live now, love now, forgive now while you still can. Let this be the moment you start listening to wisdom before it becomes a regret. The clock is ticking. But the lesson? It's timeless.